Welcome to the Manifestation and Money podcast, Angie.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I am excited to have you on the show today, too. I would love for you to share with the listeners just who you are and what your story is.
Sure. My name is Angie Tomlinson, and I live in Vernon, British Columbia. So I'm very close to you. And I'm actually, I will tell you this, I'm an American who married a Canadian. Grew up in Montana, Libby, Montana, and my husband and I met in Portland, Oregon. And, he's from Salmon Arms. He wanted to come back up here. And so I came up, and I would consider myself more Canadian than anything. I've been here since 2021, and we've raised three children up here, three daughters. I love British Columbia. I'm so grateful to be here. And anyway, we've been living here, since 2021, and we've owned two storefront businesses, and we've been a part of our community, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, fun. And when reading over your show notes, I saw glimpses of she used to be coached or mentored by Bob Proctor.
Yeah.
And for me, I love Bob Proctor. I have studied Bob Proctor for it's got to be decades now. That man just fascinated me with the wealth of knowledge that he had and that he shared. I never got to see him live in person. I only got to attend virtual events of his. But I know personally for me, he shaped a lot of my introduction into law of attraction and my introduction into just shifting my own paradigm into the world and what was potential for me. So I'm curious to hear how Bob Proctor weaved his way into your life and what that looks like.
Well, thanks, Jen. And you know what? I'm really excited for your audience to hear about this because he was just an absolute incredible man. And I know you do really good work in helping people understand manifestation. So this is just a perfect place for me to be to talk about it. In 2007, I had what is called an emotional impact in my life. My dad, who was 61, was killed by a train. It was just an accident, but I was very close to my family. And that sent me into a little bit of a distraught feeling that I didn't know I was carrying with myself because he provided safety for me. And even though I wasn't super close with my dad, he was there every day and he supported anything and everything that I wanted. And when that was gone, that ace in my pocket, the feeling of I always have this security was gone. So I was really missing that feeling inside of me. And then 2013, my mom, who both my parents were super healthy. My mom got cancer and she passed away. And she was 66. So both of my parents, never sick, very active, were both gone in my life. And I was lost. I was, they sort of helped tether me to this earth, I guess. And so when they were gone, I did not know what to do. I grew up in a church, a very religious background. And I started seeing shifts in myself where it didn't make sense anymore, especially as I was raising my own three daughters. As I began to look at my life, both of my parents are gone. My children are now growing up and they're leaving home. And because I was going through a little bit of a depression, I had a storefront business that I owned and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I walked out of it. My husband said, "Go be healthy." And so I walked out. And so if I'm not a daughter, if I'm not a mother, if I'm not a business owner, and I'm not somebody who goes to church anymore, who am I? Who am I? I didn't know who I was. And I saw this video of this gentleman talking about visualization. And I stopped and watched him. And I often say the only reason that I listened to him is because he looked like an elder at church. And I was looking for that belonging that I recognized, that paradigm. Bob introduced me to the idea of what a paradigm is. A paradigm is just a multitude of habits and behaviors. And we have things that feel really familiar to us, and they come from our programming. And so for me, looking for wisdom, if my parents are gone and I'm not a part of the church, he looked the part. I looked at him and said, "Man, I wonder if he has something to say." And I followed what he said to do in manifestation. And I joined a network marketing company and I did very, very well learning how to visualize. I left Vernon and I went to Spokane, Washington, and I actually grew my network marketing business there, but I visualized every part of it before I got there, and it happened. And as I got more and more into network marketing, I started realizing there was this gap for people. They wanted it, but they didn't know how to do it. And I found that people were really lost. And the more that I tried to help them, I started realizing I didn't have the ability to help people understand a word I didn't understand, which is manifestation. Growing up in the church, we don't use those words, manifestation. I grew up with a lot of beliefs that God would take care of it all. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, just in the essence of, I'm not a religious person, but I know I'm a spiritual person.
Yeah.
And I do know that when I come across somebody who has very strong religious beliefs, I have been judged or put down for using the word manifestation as if it was a dirty word. And to me, manifestation is so similar in a sense to prayer and intention. And so I feel like it's along the same lines. We're just calling it different things. So I'm just curious to hear your interpretation of it.
You know what? Manifestation, I was taught to be afraid of it. That's new agey. This is not God. And I really started questioning some things. And I thought, wait a minute, if I believe all things were created by him, why would I think manifestation is not? That was when I was first challenged with that idea. Who decided manifestation was wrong? And all of a sudden, I started really digging into things. And the thing that I started studying with Bob that really turned everything around for me was the natural laws, the seven natural laws. And I started studying those. And through my religious upbringing, I saw constant patterns of the natural law at work. And it was no longer about their story, it was about the feeling that they had while the story was being told. And I could imagine myself, and I started applying the laws. I wrote them down every day, and I started practicing them in things that I was reading and conversations that I was having. I isolated each of them. And yeah, I call myself the natural laws expert. And I teach people today how to use the natural laws to shift the way you think, really using science of mind, really understanding how the mind works. We have this incredible equipment within us, and we don't know how to access it. And there's a lot of, I loved how you termed it, there's a lot of woo-woo thoughts out there. And actually, manifestation is very scientific. It's extremely scientific, especially when you get to start understanding about we have an electromagnetic field around us. We actually create these electromagnetic fields just by thought. Thought energy. Thought energy is faster, even faster than the speed of light. And when you start understanding quantum physics and understanding quantum entanglements with thought, you begin to understand that atoms will work with other atoms. They have this entanglement and they don't know why it happens. It's kind of like, when you drop a magnet into a bucket of magnets, some of them repel and some of them attract. And it depends on their polarization, but they'll move, these atoms will move simultaneously with one another. And there's this entanglement with them. So when I met Bob, I felt that there was this entanglement. He resonated. What he was speaking about resonated. And it didn't matter what background he came from. I knew it was truth. And as I began to learn the natural laws, I was like, I have known these my whole life. I just didn't call them that thing. And here's the thing today, if we would ask more questions of one another, we would find out we are not different. We actually are really quite the same. And it's when we start labeling ourselves and saying, I'm Christian, you're non-Christian, all this kind of business. Listen, infinite intelligence, whatever you want to call it, God, infinite intelligence, Allah, all of these things, it is actually a source, and it works in every religion, every culture, every single thing. Every person is trying to understand how this energy works in our life. We call it different things, but the energy is still there. So I started studying with Bob, and he said to me within about 2 months, he asked me, what do you want? And I was kind of afraid to say it because I grew up with a father who was a logger, and he taught me a very strong lesson. You have to work really hard for your money. I don't know if our fathers knew one another, but I thought I had to work really hard for my money. The second thing is I grew up in church where I had a lot of beliefs about money, that money is the root of all evil. All rich people are going straight to hell. You can't serve both God and money. I had a lot of stories about money. But when my husband and I, when we had our two storefront businesses, we were working about 10 to 12 hours in our businesses each day. He had a drive-through coffee bar, and I had a soup and sandwich shop, and then I did high-end hors d'oeuvre catering. And so we were working really, really hard. We got lots of accolades. People in our community loved us, but we were bringing home $5,000 a month between the two of us. I didn't know if my electricity was going to be on. I mean, it was a good thing we had a restaurant because I don't know how we would have ate. But between having three kids in school and a car and a mortgage and your taxes and all these things, we'd go to all these city events or events as a business owner, and we were barely making it. So when my parents died, this really played on me because I couldn't really grieve. I couldn't take time off to grieve. If I didn't go to work, we didn't make money. I had always been told, go to school, get a good education, and work for someone and then start your own business. And I did all of it right. All of it right. And I was miserable. And after my parents passed, I was really depressed. And after my kids were leaving home and I didn't know who I was. And when Bob asked me, what do you want? I knew I wanted to make a lot of money. I was afraid to say it. But I finally said, I'd like to make a lot of money. He said, what's a lot? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, why don't you turn your annual income into your monthly income? And I thought, did you not just hear me? I'm working 10 to 12 hours a day. How on earth can I put a whole year into a month? When I got very upset and reactionary and everything. And he said, well, don't worry about the who or the how. I just want you to write a story as if it's happening. How would that feel? So I wrote a story as if it was happening. And he said, don't try and figure out how it's going to happen. Just what would it feel like? You know what your annual income feels like. Now, what would it feel like to make every month? And I read my story every day for 2 months. And 2 months later, I turned my annual income into a monthly income.
In
And
2 months.
I've never, in 2 months, I've never looked back. And people will often ask me, oh, what did you do? It doesn't matter what I did. It doesn't matter. The miracle in all of it is that I changed my thought. And when I entered into the spirit of that idea, an idea came and it was beyond anything I knew how to do, really. And I started working in the field of coaching. I had never thought about being a coach before. I have a background in music and business, and this was not one of them. But I mean, I'd grown up in the church and my husband was a pastor before. And so really, it seemed like this was something that I was familiar with as far as talking to people about the good news about something. And so manifestation in a really simple word just means to make in plain view. A thought that you think in your head, you bring it into plain view. So we live on three planes of ourself. We live in the spiritual plane, which is our imagination. We pull ideas from the ether, things that we're inspired about. We live on the intellectual plane. This is where our reasoning is, our thought, our education is there. And then we live on the physical, how we move objects. And so when you align all those, when you put your thought, feeling, and action, you're bringing it from imagination into the physicality. And once I connected with all of that, it was like lightning struck and it was easy. It wasn't even difficult. I wouldn't have been interested in it had it not already existed in me.
Mhm.
See, everything that you need is already within you. It's already within you. You're just not connecting it all yet. And we make it far, far, far too complicated. I can tell you that.
Complicated and hard. Like for you to be working so hard and not getting monetary the reward for that,
Yep.
and then to go to this place and shifting into Now I'm not working as hard. The work feels good. It feels easy. And now you've been making your annual income in a month. That is a big mental shift that has gone on there.
It was a big shift. And what was so interesting is that I actually just started studying myself. Everybody comes in and they want to study material. They're like, I want more information. Well, trust me, information does not equate to transformation. You have to make a decision to transform yourself, to transform and renew your mind. And I started that. I actually learned that in religion. My religion taught me that's a scripture in the Bible. So there were beliefs that I had to renew my mind and to practice repetition and to build a vibration through it. And so pretty soon I started doing so well that it got Bob's attention because my income went up and I started making $1 million. It was very easy for me to be able to do that. And I got into his inner circle of people and I got to work with them. And he started asking me to go to events and be of service at a table with people and talk to them about some of the teachings that he was doing. And I started going to one of his programs called The Matrix. And I live in Vernon, he lived in Toronto. So I had to take a flight about every other month. Now, I'm just going to tell you this. I'm a beautiful woman, but I'm a plus size woman. And so when you go to ride on a plane for 4 or 5 hours, I started getting bruises on my hips. I was uncomfortable. And when you're sitting there for that long, it's very, very uncomfortable. And so I started thinking about how could I get a flight to Toronto and feel really good about it. And at the time, it's so funny. It's silly looking back now, but at the time, I didn't really believe I was worthy of riding in first class. It's amazing. It's an unfolding of understanding yourself. But at the time, I was like, I can't do this. So what I did is I said, I want to find ease and comfort in flying. So I typed into the internet, how can a plus size person fly and have enough room and comfort? And one of the things that I found is that one of the airlines here in Canada, Air Canada, I could go to the doctor and my doctor could make sure that I could get 2 seats. I had to pass this medical thing. So I print off the sheet, I go to my doctor, and my doctor says, okay, jump up on the bench here. And so I jumped up, and it's paper, crinkly paper. So I sat on the bench and she took a pen and she made a mark on one side of my hip and made a mark on the other side of my hip. And she said, okay, jump off. And she measured my ass. Yes, you heard that. She measured my ass, filled it out. And did you know what the correct ass size is for a plane?
I didn't even know that the plane had a criteria for that, but what is it?
17 inches is the ass size.
17
So
inches.
17 inches is what they allow for a seat. And I'm not 17 inches, I'm 24 inches. And so I got a letter back from Air Canada saying, you are unable to sit in the chair, therefore you are disabled because you are obese. And so I either could look at one of two things. I got to create worlds at this moment. I was either going to create a world of being disabled and obese, or I was going to create a world that I could travel in ease and comfort.
Right.
I chose the latter.
Good.
So when I got on the plane, I remember I was really nervous because I thought sometimes when you're a plus size person, you try and hide so people won't call you out on your weight. And so I had some self-image issues that I needed to work through. But I stepped into it. And so I got on the plane and I was very nervous about it, but I sat in the plane and I got 2 seats. Oh, I got to put the side up, the side of the seat. And there was one time when I was flying before I did this, I asked the lady that I was sitting next to, I said, would you mind if I raise this up? And she was like, no, I don't want to touch you when I fly. She was very rude and it hurt my feelings. And I sat there and this was sort of when I realized I've got to do something about this. I've got to take responsibility. I wasn't going to lose 50 pounds in 2 months. And so I just said, this is not something I'm going to do. I'm not going to shame myself into doing this because I had built a self-image that I liked myself. So I had 2 seats and I got to stretch my legs out. There was extra room. It was awesome. And so the stewardess came to me and she said, I'm so glad you did this for yourself because they get alerted that I have two seats. And she said, I'm so glad you did this for yourself because not very many people will do this. They'll feel ashamed about it. She said, you're beautiful and I'm so glad you did it and it's right for you. And I said, thank you. And she said, anything you need, Mrs. Tomlinson, we are here to help you. And I said, thank you so much. I did flying and it was great. I felt refreshed every time I got there and when I flew home, and it was so lovely. Well, one time when I was flying, they overbooked the flight. And it was the summertime, it was hot. And I was flying to Toronto, and this woman got on. So it was me, that my extra seat, and her. She was grumbling and she was so mad. She said, "Oh, great! Now somebody's going to sit in this chair." I said, "No, no one will sit here." She goes, "Yes, they will. Did you not hear they overbooked the flight?" So I leaned over and I told her the story, and she said, "I remember." She grabbed my hand and she said, "I love your ass." And I went, "What?" And she goes, "I love your ass. This is awesome. We have all this room." And she was so excited. And I was like, I thought, my ass just saved someone's life. Like, it's a bit dramatic, but I thought I really brought this. So the woman and I, we had a really great talk all the way to Toronto. We got off the plane and she says, "You have to meet my husband." She introduced me to her husband. She said, "This is Angie and I love her ass." And her husband, his eyes got all buggy. And he said, and so she explained, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, I would love your ass too. I was sitting in between two girls and they talked the whole time and it was just hilarious." I felt so good. That feeling was so strong in me where instead of being ashamed and embarrassed and always trying to hide, when I went to Bob's event, they kept saying over and over again, "This is the best event we ever had. This is the best event." And I was like, "Yeah, this is the best event we've ever had." And finally, at the end, one of his assistants came to me and she said, "Angie, do you know why this was the best event?" And I said, "No, why?" She said, "You are an absolute light in the world. You lit up that whole ballroom. Your energy was so wonderful. What happened? What's happened to you since the last time I saw you?" And so I told her, "Of course, you're walking a little bit taller. I'm feeling really good about myself, all these things." So I told her the story, and through tears, she leaned over and she said, "I love your ass." And I was crying and she was crying. I said, "Right, I love my ass." And I just started saying that. I love my ass. I had always felt bad about it. I thought people didn't like me because of my size. And I was perpetuating that. I was manifesting and attracting it. And I turned it around. And I had to stay diligent in this thought. And it's, I don't think people realize when you're manifesting, you've got to buy in. Like you've got to make a committed, irrevocable decision. This I will do. Another time when I was on a flight, it was overbooked again, and two people were sort of fussing over a seat, and one of them had to leave. And the stewardess came in and said, "You're going to have to go." And somebody said, "Why can't he sit in that seat? That seat's free, and everybody on the plane is watching." And I'm just so embarrassed. This was the thing that I feared the most, that I would be called out, that somebody would say, "Why does she get two seats?" And so she said, "That's a medical seat. This woman paid for two seats. She gets two seats." And the guy just looked at me and says, "I really have to get home. My kid has this thing." And so in front of everyone watching, I said, "If you don't mind sitting close to me, I am more than happy to give up my seat." And I mean, that guy, he just hugged me and he just cuddled right up to me. And it happened to me twice. And I kept saying, "I love my ass." And he said, "I'm so grateful for you." And he said, "Thank you so much. This is what you have to buy into your idea and let the universe show you how wonderful your idea is."
By you stepping into being authentically yourself and loving yourself, you are bringing joy to the world, like you've shared.
Yes.
But now you are also providing for other people. You were giving these people essentially a ride home that the airline wasn't providing for them, but
No.
you were able to provide that for them.
Nope. I said to him, and Jess, I said, "You know what? I've learned to love my ass." And he said, I love your ass. I think it's fantastic. And I wanted, so this is how I carry that light within me now,
Mhm.
still to this day. And I know that the asset that I thought was bad was actually a positive asset. And I look at that in my life instead of looking at it negatively. I look at it in a positive way. Every single thing has a polarity. That's one of the natural laws, is the law of polarity. There is nothing in the world that does not have an opposite to it. And so if you're in the habit of seeing it over here, no more effort is required for you to see it another way. It's all a matter of shifting your mindset and starting to build new neural pathways to that idea. And this is what I spend all of my time helping people do with money, with relationships, with their career, with their businesses, is that the thought that you are thinking is what is attracting to you. There's another natural law that I think people very much misunderstand. I think it's the most misunderstood natural law. It's the law of perpetual transmutation. And that means that any energy that comes to you, however you're using it, feared or revered, will begin at once to attract itself to you. And we're not aware of our thoughts. We think our thoughts are secret. They are not. They're an energy. You are sending it out. You are a beacon for the thoughts that you keep inside. And you can say all the right words you want. You can do all the affirmations you want. But if you have a little bit of a angst about it, that is the feeling is what is the secret. The feeling is what manifests, not the words, not the deeds, not any of that. It's the feeling of it. I just had somebody say to me, they went to a health practitioner and the cost was like $600 and he went to go pay for it. And he was grateful to go there. It was sort of outside of what he thought it would be, but it was $600. And so he paid it. And then there was a tip thing on there. And his habit is his obligation is always to tip. And he'd been working with me and he sat there and he went ahead and tipped because he thought he should. And so he sent out this energy and he was kind of angry that he did it. And so all the work that health practitioner did all of a sudden goes null and void. Not because what that person did for him didn't work, but his own attitude about it undid it. And people don't understand why manifestation doesn't work because they're not aware of their thoughts. Are you aware of what you're being aware of? And this is where people, when they come and work with me, I'll tell them, do not come in here and study my material through you. You'll lose. Study you through the material. This
Mhm.
is where you'll have transformation. And this is why getting a coach or having a coach is so important, or being in a community of people, because we all come from some kind of programming that we default to without thinking. We really aren't thinking most of the time. We're really just replaying old paradigms. And it takes effort to think. It takes a lot of effort until it doesn't, until it's natural.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's the personal growth. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the perfect segue there for you to allow listeners where they can reach out and step in your world and learn more about the laws and learn more about how they can learn about themselves.
Yes. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Angie Tomlinson. And then my company is called Elevate You Institute. So you can go to elevateyouinstitute.com. And in there, I have a website and there's all kinds of great information. I have an activation talk that I give once a week called Go For It. And it's to activate inside of you your ability to manifest. You can go and sign up for that. That I would love to have you attend. It's a really small group every time that I do it because I do it once a week. And it's always incredible the people that show up for it. I'll give you the link for it and you can put it in the bio part as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I will pop that in the show notes. And before I let you go, I just have to ask, what is your biggest piece of advice for the listeners to go out and create a life that they love?
Make a committed decision, feel into the decision, and just let it rain. Let it come to you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Angie.
Thank you.